Edit single dad saw bruises after his daughter's first school day. 24 hours later, the company fell. How could one ordinary school day lead to something so extraordinary? What happened during those 24 hours to connect these two events? Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another unforgettable story. If you enjoy heartfelt stories about courage, justice, and the unbreakable bond between family, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Your support means more than you know, and we're truly grateful to have you with us on this journey. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, what would you do if your child came home from school with unexplained bruises? Now, let's step into the moment when one father noticed something that changed everything. Daddy, please don't make me go back tomorrow. Ethan Brooks stopped walking the instant he heard those words. His 6-year-old daughter had never asked to miss school before, not even when she had the flu last winter. She stood beside him at the edge of the sidewalk, clutching the strap of her tiny backpack with both hands. Her eyes stayed fixed on the pavement, as if looking up would make something terrible happen again. The afternoon sun stretched their shadows across the quiet suburban street, yet the silence between them felt heavier than anything Ethan had carried since becoming a single father. He knelt until they were face to face and offered the same gentle smile that had always made her laugh. "Hey, sweetheart. Tough first day." Emma forced a tiny nod, but it didn't reach her eyes. She shifted her backpack higher, and the sleeve of her new sweater slipped back just enough for Ethan to notice faint purple marks near her wrist. He didn't react. Not yet. Years of raising Emma alone had taught him something important. Children spoke when they felt safe, not when they felt cornered. He carefully pulled her sleeve down again before anyone passing by could notice. "How about we grab your favorite chocolate milk on the way home?" Emma hesitated for several seconds before whispering, "Can we just go home?" That answer unsettled him far more than the marks themselves. She loved stopping at the neighborhood grocery store after school. It had been their tradition since preschool orientation. As they walked toward the family sedan, Ethan noticed something else. Emma glanced over her shoulder twice, almost as if she expected someone to be watching her. He quietly followed her gaze, but all he saw was the yellow school bus disappearing around the corner. The parking lot had nearly emptied. Parents chatted while children laughed and chased one another across the grass. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. Somehow, that made him even more uneasy. During the drive home, the radio played softly, filling the silence neither of them seemed ready to break. Ethan asked simple questions about her teacher, her classmates, and lunch. Emma answered with 1 or 2 words before retreating into silence again. It wasn't like her. She usually couldn't wait to tell him every tiny detail of her day. When they reached home, she carefully placed her backpack by the front door instead of tossing it onto the floor like she always did. Then she disappeared upstairs without asking if she could watch cartoons. Ethan stood alone in the hallway, staring at the unopened backpack. Something inside him whispered that today wasn't just a difficult first day of school. Something had changed. As he reached for the zipper, his phone vibrated with an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it until a single voicemail notification appeared. The message lasted only 6 seconds. A calm voice said, "If you want the truth, don't trust what the school tells you tomorrow." The voicemail ended before Ethan could press the speaker button again. He listened to it 3 more times, hoping he had misunderstood the words, but the calm voice never changed. Emma quietly walked back downstairs wearing her favorite blue pajamas and carrying the stuffed rabbit she had slept with since she was 3 years old. She stopped when she saw her father still standing by the kitchen counter. "Daddy?" she asked softly. Ethan slipped his phone into his pocket and smiled. "How about grilled cheese for dinner?" She nodded without saying another word. That worried him more than anything. Emma usually filled the house with questions, stories, and laughter. Tonight, every sentence seemed to weigh 100 pounds. While the sandwiches browned in the skillet, Ethan noticed Emma coloring at the kitchen table. She had always loved drawing happy little neighborhoods with sunshine, flowers, and smiling stick figures. This picture was different. A small school stood in the middle of the page. Every window was colored gray. One little figure stood alone outside, while everyone else remained inside. Ethan sat beside her without mentioning the drawing. "That is a beautiful tree," he said, pointing toward the corner of the page. Emma looked at it for a moment before whispering, "Trees do not tell secrets." Ethan felt his heartbeat slow. Children often express difficult experiences through simple words. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. You can always tell me anything. She looked into his eyes for the first time since leaving school. Her lower lip trembled. Will you get into trouble? Ethan smiled again, this time with quiet confidence. Not for listening to my little girl. Emma seemed ready to speak. Instead, the sound of the doorbell made her flinch. She quickly folded the drawing in half and tucked it beneath her coloring book. Ethan opened the front door to find his next-door neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, holding a casserole dish. First day of school deserves a celebration, she said warmly. Then she noticed Emma hiding behind her father. Her smile faded ever so slightly. Everything all right? Ethan answered politely. Long day. She is exhausted. Mrs. Alvarez nodded. But before leaving, she looked directly at Ethan and said, Sometimes children need time before they find the right words. The sentence lingered in his mind long after she walked away. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, Ethan finally opened her backpack. Inside were neatly folded worksheets, unopened crayons, and a welcome packet from the school. Nothing seemed unusual until a small folded paper slipped from the inside pocket onto the floor. It was not addressed to anyone. Across the top, written in a child's careful handwriting, were 6 simple words. Please do not tell the principal. Ethan unfolded the page slowly. His eyes moved across the first sentence, and the color drained from his face. Whatever Emma had been trying to hide, she was not the only child carrying that burden. Sleep barely visited Ethan that night. The folded note stayed on the kitchen table beside a cooling cup of coffee, and every time he read the first sentence, another question surfaced. It read, They told us accidents stay inside the school. The words were simple, but they did not sound like something a first grader would invent on her own. Before sunrise, Ethan quietly packed Emma's lunch, adding the apple slices she always requested and a small handwritten note that simply said, I love you. I will always listen. When Emma came downstairs, she looked at her backpack before looking at him. Do I have to go? She asked in a voice so quiet it almost disappeared. Ethan crouched beside her and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You do not have to do anything until we talk to your school together. Her shoulders relaxed for the first time since yesterday. She slipped her small hand into his, and they drove to the elementary school beneath a gray morning sky. Parents smiled as children hurried toward the entrance, but Ethan noticed Emma instinctively stepping closer whenever another adult walked past. Inside the front office, the receptionist greeted them with a practiced smile. Good morning. How can I help you? Ethan kept his voice calm. I would like to speak with the principal before my daughter starts class. The receptionist hesitated just long enough for him to notice. She has a full schedule this morning. Ethan nodded politely. We can wait. Several minutes later, Principal Linda Harris welcomed them into her office. Her walls displayed awards, cheerful student artwork, and framed photographs from community events. Everything about the room suggested warmth and trust. How is Emma adjusting? She asked pleasantly. Ethan glanced toward his daughter, who had lowered her eyes to the carpet. That is exactly what I hoped to discuss, he replied. She came home unusually frightened yesterday, and I noticed marks on her wrist. Principal Harris folded her hands together. The first day can be overwhelming. Children sometimes bump into desks or playground equipment while they are excited. Ethan listened without interrupting. That is certainly possible, he said. Then perhaps you can help me understand this. He carefully placed the folded note on the desk. The principal's smile faded for the briefest moment before returning. Children exchange all kinds of notes, she answered. They often have vivid imaginations. Ethan did not argue. Instead, he watched her eyes. She looked at the paper only once before sliding it aside. That tiny movement unsettled him more than her explanation. As they stood to leave, Emma reached for her father's hand. Just before they stepped into the hallway, an older custodian pushing a supply cart slowed beside them. Without looking directly at Ethan, he quietly said, If you are asking questions, ask about yesterday's maintenance inspection. Then he continued down the corridor as though nothing had happened. Ethan turned to call after him, but the man had already disappeared around the corner, leaving behind one quiet sentence that suddenly made yesterday's mysterious voicemail feel far less random. The old custodian disappeared before Ethan could say another word, but the sentence stayed with him all the way back to the parking lot. Emma climbed into the back seat without being asked. She buckled herself in and hugged her stuffed rabbit against her chest. Ethan started the engine, yet neither of them spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, he looked at her in the rearview mirror. "Would you feel better staying home with me today?" Emma nodded almost immediately. "Please." He smiled gently. "Then that is exactly what we are going to do." He called his office, requested a personal day, and drove toward home instead of the highway. While Emma watched an old animated movie in the living room, Ethan opened his laptop and searched for the school's publicly available maintenance reports. Nothing unusual appeared until he noticed a small reference to an outside contractor responsible for inspecting security equipment. The company name sounded familiar, but he could not remember why. He searched again, this time opening archived business records. His expression slowly changed. The contractor was a subsidiary of Cole Educational Systems, one of the largest education management companies in the country. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Years earlier, before leaving the technology industry to spend more time raising Emma after his wife's passing, he had helped develop cybersecurity software used by several large corporations. Cole Educational Systems had been one of those clients. He no longer worked with them, but he remembered one important detail. Their internal compliance system automatically recorded every maintenance inspection and every security camera status update. Those records were designed to prevent exactly the kind of confusion the principal had described. If yesterday's inspection really happened, there should be a digital record. His thoughts were interrupted when Emma quietly entered the room, carrying her folded drawing. "Daddy," she asked, "can I show you something now?" Ethan closed the laptop immediately. Of course. She unfolded the picture she had hidden beneath her coloring book. On the back, faint pencil marks formed another drawing she had almost erased. It showed the same school hallway, but this time a small black circle was sketched high in one corner. Emma pointed to it. "That is the camera." Ethan looked carefully. "Why did you draw that?" She hesitated before answering. "Because yesterday it was looking at us. Then later it was not." Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He did not press her for more. Instead, he thanked her for trusting him and carefully placed the drawing beside the mysterious note from the backpack. Two unrelated clues suddenly seemed connected. Just after lunch, his phone rang again from another unknown number. This time a woman spoke before he could say anything. Her voice was calm but unmistakably nervous. "Do not contact the school again until you see the maintenance report. Someone changed it this morning." The line went dead. Ethan stared at the silent phone for several seconds before opening his laptop. Once more, when he refreshed the inspection page, the report he had read less than an hour earlier had completely disappeared. The missing report transformed Ethan's concern into quiet determination. Records did not simply vanish without leaving questions behind, especially inside a company that built its reputation on accountability. He opened an old email archive from his consulting days and searched for one name he had not thought about in years. Michael Turner had been a compliance engineer at Cole Educational Systems, a careful man who believed every digital action left a trail. Ethan hesitated before sending a brief message. Within 15 minutes, his phone rang. "Ethan Brooks?" Michael asked, sounding surprised. "It has been a long time." Ethan smiled politely. "Longer than either of us expected. I need to ask you something important." He explained only the facts. A first day at school. An inspection report that disappeared. Anonymous warnings. Michael remained silent until Ethan finished. Finally, he sighed. "Officially, I cannot discuss internal systems anymore because I retired last year. Unofficially, reports almost never disappear. They are usually replaced. If someone edited one this morning, the previous version still exists somewhere." Ethan thanked him, but before ending the call, Michael added one more sentence. "If this involves children's safety, do not stop asking questions." Those words settled deep inside Ethan's heart. He was not searching for someone to blame. He wanted the truth, nothing more and nothing less. That afternoon, Emma helped him bake chocolate chip cookies, carefully counting each spoonful of sugar as though returning to a familiar routine made the world feel safe again. While the cookies cooled on the counter, Ethan noticed her smiling for the first time since school had started. The smile was small, but it reminded him exactly why he refused to let fear make decisions for their family. His laptop chimed with a new message. There was no sender name, only an attachment labeled Inspection Timeline. The file contained a simple list of timestamps. One line immediately stood out. Security camera hallway East Wing disconnected at 1:42 p.m. reconnected at 2:11 p.m. Ethan looked at the clock. According to Emma's class schedule, dismissal preparation had begun just minutes after the camera came back online. Someone had chosen a very specific window when that hallway would not be recorded. Before he could study the document further, another notification appeared. This one came from the elementary school. It politely requested a meeting the following morning with Principal Harris and a regional representative from Cole Educational Systems to discuss misunderstandings surrounding Emma's first day. Ethan read the message twice. The timing was impossible to ignore. Only hours after anonymous warnings and a vanished report, the company itself wanted a conversation. He printed the inspection timeline, placed it beside the handwritten note and Emma's drawing, then slipped all three into a plain manila folder. He believed in listening before accusing, and in facts before assumptions. As the sun disappeared beyond the neighborhood rooftops, Emma curled beside him on the couch and quietly asked, "Will everything be all right?" Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders and answered with complete honesty. "I do not know everything yet, sweetheart, but I promise you this. We are going to find the truth together." At that exact moment, a black sedan rolled slowly past the house for the second time that evening before disappearing around the corner without stopping. Morning arrived with clear skies, but the quiet inside Ethan's house carried the weight of unanswered questions. He prepared pancakes shaped like little stars because that had always been Emma's favorite breakfast before special days. She managed a small smile as she sprinkled blueberries across her plate. It was not the carefree joy he remembered, but it was hope, and hope was enough to keep moving forward. Before leaving, Ethan placed the manila folder containing the handwritten note, the drawing, and the inspection timeline inside a worn leather briefcase he had not carried in years. During the drive, Emma looked out the passenger window instead of toward the school. "Will they be angry that I stayed home yesterday?" she asked quietly. Ethan reached across the center console and gently squeezed her hand at the next red light. "Good people are never angry when someone asks honest questions," he replied. "And if someone does become angry, that tells us we should keep asking." Emma nodded, holding those words close. The district administration building stood only a few miles from the school, modern and welcoming with polished glass doors and neatly trimmed landscaping. Inside the conference room, Principal Linda Harris sat beside a sharply dressed executive who introduced himself as Daniel Mercer, Regional Operations Director for Cole Educational Systems. His smile was polished, his handshake confident, and his voice carefully measured. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming. We understand there have been some misunderstandings regarding your daughter's first day." Ethan returned the handshake politely and took his seat beside Emma. "I appreciate the opportunity to talk," he answered calmly. "I am only interested in understanding what happened." Mercer nodded. "That is exactly our goal." The conversation began with routine explanations about busy hallways, nervous first graders, and ordinary childhood accidents. Ethan listened without interruption, occasionally glancing toward Emma, who remained unusually quiet. When Mercer finished, Ethan opened the folder and placed the inspection timeline on the table. "Could you help me understand why a hallway security camera was disconnected during the school day?" For the first time, Mercer's confident expression shifted. He studied the document for several seconds before looking toward Principal Harris. She appeared equally surprised. "I have never seen this report," she said carefully. Ethan spoke with the same calm tone he had maintained since entering the room. "Neither had I until yesterday." Mercer folded his hands together. "May I ask where you obtained this?" Ethan smiled politely. "Right now I think the more important question is whether it is accurate." Silence settled over the room. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Finally Mercer stood and stepped into the hallway with his phone. Through the glass wall, Ethan watched him make two hurried calls before returning. His voice sounded different now, less rehearsed and more cautious. "Mr. Brooks, I believe there may be information that has not yet reached our office." Ethan did not celebrate. He did not accuse. He simply waited. Then the conference room door opened once more, and the elderly custodian from the school quietly walked inside carrying a sealed envelope marked Internal Compliance Review. Without saying a word, he placed it directly in front of Ethan before looking at Mercer and saying, "This one was almost deleted too." The room became so quiet that even the soft hum of the air conditioner seemed unusually loud. Ethan looked at the sealed envelope, but made no move to open it immediately. Instead, he looked at the elderly custodian. "Why are you giving this to me?" The man's tired eyes settled on Emma before returning to Ethan. "Because every child deserves an adult who refuses to look away." Daniel Mercer slowly exhaled. "Frank, that file is confidential." The custodian nodded respectfully. "It was confidential yesterday. Today it is evidence that someone inside this system made decisions without following company policy." Principal Linda Harris leaned forward, clearly unsettled. "I have never seen that envelope before." Frank answered gently. "That is because it was never supposed to leave the compliance office." Ethan carefully broke the seal and removed several neatly organized documents. The first page listed maintenance activity. The second contained internal email summaries. The third page stopped him completely. It showed that the hallway camera had not experienced a technical failure at all. It had been manually placed into temporary maintenance mode after a request submitted earlier that afternoon. Ethan read the line twice before quietly asking, "Who authorized this request?" Mercer reached for the document, studying it with growing concern. "The approval field is missing." Frank nodded. That field was removed from the public version. No one spoke for several moments. Emma quietly reached for her father's hand beneath the conference table. Ethan squeezed it gently, reminding her without words that she was safe. Mercer finally looked up. His polished confidence had disappeared, replaced by genuine concern. "Mr. Brooks, I owe you an apology. We believed we were responding to a worried parent. It now appears we are dealing with something much more serious." Ethan remained calm. "I am not interested in embarrassing anyone. I only want complete honesty." Mercer nodded slowly. "So do I." He immediately called the company's legal compliance office on speakerphone. After introducing himself, he requested an emergency preservation order preventing any electronic records connected to the school from being altered or deleted. The attorney on the line agreed without hesitation. Ethan noticed Principal Harris closing her eyes briefly, as though replaying every conversation she had held during the past 24 hours. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded sincere. "If information was hidden from me, I want to know the truth as much as you do." Frank quietly smiled for the first time. That is how trust begins. Before anyone could continue, another employee hurried into the conference room, carrying a tablet. "Mr. Mercer," she said, struggling to catch her breath. "Corporate headquarters just flagged an unusual access log. Someone attempted to overwrite archived security records early this morning, but the system automatically created a protected backup." Mercer immediately took the tablet and reviewed the screen. His expression hardened. The backup includes the original camera footage index. Ethan noticed one important detail. The file names remained intact even though the recordings themselves required higher authorization to access. One timestamp matched exactly with the period Emma had described in her drawing. Mercer slowly looked up from the tablet and met Ethan's eyes. "If those archived files contain what I think they contain, this investigation is about to reach people far above this school." Daniel Mercer requested immediate access to the protected archive, but the response from corporate headquarters arrived within minutes. The files had been placed under executive review, meaning no one inside the regional office could open them without authorization from the company's central compliance division. Instead of showing frustration, Ethan quietly leaned back in his chair. He had spent enough years working with large technology firms to understand that every secure system followed the same principle. When one door closed, another record almost always remained. Mercer noticed the thoughtful look on Ethan's face. "You are thinking about something," he said. Ethan nodded. "The recordings may be restricted, but systems leave more than videos. They leave access histories, authentication logs, maintenance requests, and approval chains. Someone had to create every action that appears in those records." Frank smiled faintly. "Exactly." Mercer immediately instructed the compliance team to preserve every related log connected to the school during the previous 48 hours. Within 20 minutes, another report appeared on the conference room screen. This one contained no images, only timestamps and employee credentials. Yet one detail immediately captured everyone's attention. The request that placed the hallway camera into maintenance mode had not originated from the school. It had been submitted remotely through a corporate administrative account. Principal Harris slowly shook her head. "No one here has permission to do that." Mercer stared at the monitor in disbelief. Neither should anyone outside a scheduled maintenance window. Ethan remained silent, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. Emma sat quietly beside him, drawing small flowers on a blank sheet of paper that Frank had found in his supply cart. The simple picture seemed almost out of place among conversations about investigations and digital records, but it reminded every adult in the room why they were there. Mercer placed both hands on the conference table. This is no longer a local matter. He contacted corporate headquarters once again and requested an emergency video conference. Less than 15 minutes later, 3 senior executives appeared on the large display at the front of the room. Their expressions changed noticeably as Mercer summarized the sequence of events. He presented the handwritten note, the missing inspection report, the restored timeline, the archived maintenance logs, and finally the remote administrative authorization. None of the executives interrupted him. When he finished, the oldest executive adjusted his glasses and quietly asked, "Has anyone informed the board?" Mercer answered, "Not yet. I wanted verified facts first." The executive nodded with visible approval. "You made the correct decision." Another executive turned toward Ethan through the camera. "Mr. Brooks, I want to personally thank you for remaining patient throughout this process. Most people would have reacted with anger. You chose evidence instead." Ethan answered with the same calm dignity he had shown from the beginning. "I only wanted someone to listen to my daughter." The room fell silent. Even the executives on the screen seemed moved by those simple words. At that exact moment, the compliance analyst monitoring the archive suddenly looked up from her computer. "I found something," she said. The protected backup was not limited to system logs. An automated integrity feature also preserved a written incident summary that someone attempted to remove yesterday afternoon. Mercer slowly stood from his chair. "Read the first line." The analyst swallowed hard before speaking. The report begins with these words. "Student concern initially dismissed before mandatory escalation procedure was intentionally bypassed." No one in the conference room spoke after the analyst finished reading the first line. The silence carried more weight than any argument ever could. Daniel Mercer slowly removed his company identification badge and placed it on the table before looking at the executives on the video screen. "The evidence now confirms that mandatory reporting procedures were interrupted," he said. "Our responsibility is no longer to protect our reputation. It is to restore trust." The senior executive gave a firm nod. "Effective immediately, all personnel connected to the decision chain will be placed on administrative leave, pending an independent review. The board will receive the complete file within the hour." Principal Linda Harris lowered her eyes. "I believe the explanations I was given," she admitted quietly. "I should have asked more questions." Ethan did not answer with anger. He simply said, "The important thing is asking them now." Emma looked up at her father, and for the first time since her first day of school, she gently smiled without hesitation. Frank, the elderly custodian, rested one hand on the back of a nearby chair. "Children notice when adults choose honesty," he said. "They remember it for the rest of their lives." Minutes later, another compliance specialist entered the room carrying printed copies of the restored incident summary. The document revealed that an employee had initially documented concerns raised by several students before the report was redirected instead of being processed through the required safety review. It also confirmed that the temporary camera maintenance request had created unnecessary confusion during the exact period when those concerns should have been independently verified. The company executives immediately authorized a full external audit of every related procedure, promising complete cooperation with educational authorities and independent child safety consultants. Daniel Mercer turned toward Ethan with unmistakable sincerity. "Mr. Brooks, your patience prevented us from overlooking a serious failure in our own system. You did not attack people. You followed the facts. Because of that, we have an opportunity to correct what should never have happened." Ethan glanced at Emma before answering. Every parent would have done the same if someone had listened. Mercer quietly shook his head. Not every parent would have remained this calm. Ethan smiled gently. "Calm is easier when your goal is truth instead of revenge." The words settled over the room with quiet dignity. Later that afternoon, as Ethan and Emma walked out of the administration building together, the warm sunlight felt different. Emma slipped her small hand into his and looked up with bright eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, "I am not scared anymore." Ethan knelt beside her and hugged her carefully. "You were brave long before today," he said. "You just needed people willing to hear you." Behind them, news of the internal investigation had already begun spreading. Through the company, emergency board meetings were being scheduled, executives were reviewing long-ignored procedures, and every archived record connected to the school was now permanently protected from alteration. Less than 24 hours after Ethan had quietly noticed faint marks on his daughter's wrist, the failures hidden inside one of the nation's largest education companies could no longer remain hidden. The company itself had not fallen because of one father's anger. It had been brought to its knees by something far stronger: the quiet courage of a little girl, the steady dignity of a devoted father, and the simple decision to let the truth speak for itself.